And welcome back to the Conclusions Podcast for Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, it's finally here. 8 months in the making, a blockbuster trade for a franchise quarterback, an offseason full of excitement and storylines, hard knocks. It's finally here. All comes down to one game. This is the most important game of the season, and if they lose, their season is over. Week 1, Monday Night Football, Buffalo Bills. How you feeling, man?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, this is do or die. If they lose this game after everything we went through this offseason, all the excitement, all the hype, I mean, I don't think we're even going to do a recap podcast because the season is effectively over at that point. I
You
mean,
know
we
what?
could
You
do a
shouldn't even
draft
joke about
preview,
that.
um, we could do free agency preview, but I definitely won't be watching the rest of the games if they lose. But if they win, then I think we can come on here. We could look at some flights, maybe some hotels for Vegas in February. I'm already going to be there in November for the
You're
Raiders game,
scouting out
but
locations.
yeah, I could scout out locations a little bit and make sure we're all set up for February.
It does feel like that every year. Week 1 just feels like do or Thomas Morstead had a tweet about that too, where it's like
Yeah,
if they win, it's like they're Super Bowl favorites, and if they lose next week against Dallas is a must win. And he's like, none of that's true. But it is a huge opportunity for the Jets to make a statement. Obviously, this offseason has been a lot. The Jets have been the media darlings. Everybody's going to be watching. I would imagine the numbers and ratings for that Monday Night Football game are going to be insane. So the whole world's watching to see, are these still the same old Jets? And we joke about the fact that their season will be over if they lose. It's not the case. Especially in if they did lose, how did they lose? Um, but it is an important opportunity for them to make a statement. So, and it's a divisional game. And I think this year those games are going to be even more important because the Jets' goal this year is not just to make the playoffs, it's to win the division. So it starts right here at home, anniversary 9/11, Rodgers debut, primetime football. Go out there and beat a rival that you honestly could have swept last year. One CJ Mosley penalty away, and I guess there are a few other things in that game at Buffalo last year that cost them that. But the Jets have shown they can beat this team. They match up well against Allen. Very excited about this matchup. So, Michael, let's just hop into it. We've done a lot of work to prepare this game preview. I guess I'll turn it over to you first. This is a different Bills team. They've kind of flown under the radar a little bit this offseason because they've been so good the last few years, and the Jets have stolen the spotlight. Miami gets a lot of love. There's a lot of good teams in the AFC, but to me, I know the Chiefs are the defending champs, so I guess they're the ones with the biggest target on the back. But the Bills are a mainstay when you have a coach and a QB like Allen. I guess kind of walk us through their offseason a little bit. What's different about this team? Do you think they're better or worse than last year? We'll hop into the specifics with their offense and their defense, but let's just start with who do they add and who do they lose?
well, I think for the most part, the Bills really remain stable going into this next season, which is something they've done really throughout the past few years since they emerged into a contender. Is they've maintained that stability, not a ton of huge additions and losses, and yes, they've had a few here or there, but they've done a good job of maintaining continuity, and that's why I think they're a team that has stayed on top and is in a really good position to continue staying on top for the future because they have a very firmly established culture and core. And I think they're an example of what the Jets want to build towards in the future. Being that team where you know who your core guys are, you know what your mentality is, how you play on both sides of the ball. That's what the Bills have really established. So I like the continuity they have. But with that being said, I think the biggest news came recently, last week or the week before that, with Von Miller not playing in this game. That was enormous news. He's going to be on the PUP list and miss these first 4 games. So that's a massive game changer. He had a strip sack last year against the Jets, and we'll get more into the impact of that and the schematics and everything. But it goes without saying, he's still a superstar. Had 8 sacks in 11 games last year, and their pass rush really declined without him. So still on the team, but for the purpose of this game, that is by far the most significant addition or loss for this Bills team. But they did sign Leonard Floyd, so that helps them fall back on it better than they might have at the end of last season. He's had 9 sacks for a few seasons in a row now. They added, obviously, on offense, used an early pick on Dalton Kincaid, which was interesting, but we'll get a glimpse for the first time what that offense is going to look like with him and Dawson Knox in the offense together. They added some veteran running back depth with Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. And then on the O-line, they got the other Connor McGovern. And probably this is the first time in the history of the league we'll see two starting offensive linemen with the same name starting against each other. Don't quote me on that, but
Only
it's got to
yeah,
be the
only
first time,
only the
right? Unless
important
there's some
stuff.
John Smiths in the league.
That's
But
true.
definitely no Connor McGovern matchups, that's for sure. But I also thought Isaiah McKenzie was an interesting loss because he was a quietly good playmaker for them. Like he never had a huge involvement in the offense in terms of getting a lot of touches, but he was always really efficient when he got the ball on end arounds and screens and stuff. He was a good player for them, so he's out of there. And their receiver depth after that top two is kind of thin, really. I mean, Diggs, Gabe Davis is a nice top two there, but then Deontay Hardy, Khalil Shakir, and Trent Sherfield. It's really, three and beyond on their depth chart at wide receiver, probably one of the lower ones in the league. So that's an opportunity for the
It does
Jets
make you
to
feel better about
win
the
some
Jets
matchups.
depth.
It does. It does. Like sometimes, and I'm guilty of this sometimes, critical of the depth of this unit, but you look around the league and there are some depth charts that remind you what the standards are for third, fourth, fifth receiver. And I think the Bills are one of them. So yeah, I think that kind of sums up their offseason for the most part. It's very much the same Bills team that has a lot of the same mainstays that have been here since they broke into the playoffs in 2019 for that for the first time with Josh Allen. So it's a lot of consistency with this roster, and that I think there's good and bad to that because the good is the continuity. Like I said, I think it's a big reason why they've been consistently good and can continue to be consistently good. But at the same time, some of these guys are getting up there a little bit. You look at Micah Hyde, who's questionable going into this game. He missed practice with a back injury. You look at Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, especially in that secondary, those three guys. You got guys who are getting up there. And the two safeties are in the 30s. White is 29, I believe. So, these guys are getting a little bit old in some spots, but at the same time, they've been so good and so consistent that you have to believe they're going to continue to be until they prove you otherwise. So I still am very much, I was going to say, fearful of this Bills team. I'm not going to say that because the Jets have a roster now that can go toe-to-toe with anybody, but it's still a great Bills team, and I expect great things from them this season. I mean, what do you think overall of the Bills going into the season? Do you view them in a similar light as recent seasons? Do you see them maybe declining a little bit based on some of the age concerns? Where are you with them?
I'm gonna hit you with a hot take, and
Okay.
you tell me if I'm just being a homer. The Jets are, I believe, 2.5-point underdogs in this game.
Yeah.
To me, they should be 2.5-point favorites. I think the Jets are the favorites in this game, and maybe I'm just biased.
I can see it. I think it's just because they don't believe.
They haven't proven
The
anything. I
books
get
don't
why.
believe in the Jets yet. They haven't proven it, but yeah.
I get why, but you look at these rosters, you look at what this Jets defense did to Josh Allen last year, you look how these teams match up. I'm sorry, the Jets have the edge. And now look, I might eat my words a week from now. I think, the biggest X factor is definitely Von Miller, and you mentioned it before. And I was really surprised because we were, preparing just a bunch of miscellaneous details. And with Von Miller last year, because the Bills and the Jets are actually philosophically pretty similar defensively. They want to beat you with just rushing four and dropping people into coverage. They play that too high shell and alternate between their quarters coverage and cover three. They played a lot more cover two last year, but with Von Miller, they were fourth in pressure rate, and then without him last year, they were 27th. So that's a huge
specifically on the 4-man rush.
Yes, specifically on the four-man rush, and we'll see. Maybe they blitz a little bit more. But I think, they only blitzed Rodgers once last year because to me, Rodgers is a quarterback that you don't really want to blitz that much. He's the type of quarterback that you do want to just beat with your four-man rush, which again, I think is part of the reason he was attracted to coming to New York and playing under this Robert Saleh system because he knows how hard it is to win as a veteran quarterback. You can, have all the talent in the world, have all the experience in the world, but if you're, a four-man defensive rush is getting to you in 2 seconds or less, it's just hard to beat those 7 guys in coverage. So I'm curious to see what the Bills do to kind of make up for that Von Miller injury. Yes, they do have Leonard Floyd, and they did beef up their defensive line a bit. But week one, this Jets offensive line is healthy. I don't think it's as big as a concern. In fact, when you compare both these offensive lines, I'm taking the Jets unit. Do you agree with me, Michael? I would take the Jets offensive line.
Agree.
We'll save it to the end of the pod.
An article at JetX recently that stacked up all the AFC East offensive lines, and the Bills are, all four have talent. I would say they're are a lot of units worse than those four, but the Bills, I think, were fourth in pass blocking and third in run blocking among the four AFC East lines. So it's really a unit that, like, everyone in the media is going to talk about the Jets because there's so many other good things going on with them that they're like, okay, where's the flaw O-line in front of Rodgers? So that's going to get the attention while the Bills are, the mainstay. They've scored a lot of points, been great offensively, but their O-line is a concern as well. And we know Josh Allen last year, his effectiveness in the second half of the season fell off a little bit after that injury that he took courtesy of the hit by Bryce Huff in that first Jets game. So it's very much a concern for them as well, if not more so than the Jets. I think maybe it's just, the injury proneness of the Jets offensive line that
Right.
adds to the drama. And,
Well,
maybe the Bills aren't quite as severe, but talent wise, I agree. I would take the Jets.
and the thing is Allen is built like a tight end. So
Yeah.
he's 6'6" back there. He can
He
take
can
some
tank
shots.
those hits. Yeah.
Right. He can take the shots and he can run. And so I think he makes up for some of their woes. And I don't think, they did bring in McGovern and, they have Mitch Morse. There's a few matchups we want to get to in a bit, but they're not ready for this defensive line that's coming. The Jets are about as healthy as you can ask for entering a season. They lost Chuck Clark in the spring, and that was a big blow. But I think besides that, Michael, they're entering this game full health. This defensive line is 10 deep. We'll see if they're all active. But regardless, they're going to come after Rodgers with their four-man rush, and that O-line isn't ready for it. And on the flip side of things, yes, I think this Jets offensive line has the potential to really fall apart and could become an issue, especially if Rodgers gets injured. But week one, they're all healthy. Like, yes, we're counting on Mekhi Becton staying healthy, and that's a big question mark, but he's healthy right now. He is a difference maker when he's out there in the field. We know that. It's just, is he going to be out in the field? He's out there. Dwayne Brown's back. We'll see about the interior, but I feel good about the Jets offensive line. The team is healthy as a whole. And the thing I just keep coming back to is I don't think this Bills offensive line is ready for what's coming. I really don't. I think the Bills are a good football team. I think, when they play again later in the year and the Bills have Von Miller, I think these teams stack up a little bit better. I'm not saying the Jets are going to blow them out, but I feel pretty good about the Jets winning this game. And of course, Bills fans can run with the soundbite a week from now, but I feel good about this. Let's start with the Bills offense and this Jets defense. I guess it's this week one is a little hard to prepare these previews because it is a completely different team. Like, we broke down their personnel percentages and kind of their pass run splits and some keys, but that's all going to change, especially with the personnel percentage, because they only played 12 personnel 22% of the time, which is 21st in the league. But you imagine with Knox and Kincaid, they're going to play a lot more 12. They also lost McKenzie, and they were 5th in the league in 11th personnel last year. So you'd imagine that they're not going to play 11 as much. So some of these personnel statistics, Michael, might be a little outdated, but we figured we'd provide them. Overview of the Bills offense. We'll get into some of these big matchups, but what do you kind of make of this Bills offense as a whole?
Well, yeah, looking at some of the personnel stuff, and like you said, it's very much subject to change. But they were a big time 11 personnel team last year, which means 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. 73% of the time last year, that was 5th most in the league. So about 3/4 of their plays, they had that package out there, and I feel like that's going to go down this year because, like you said, McKenzie, they lost him, didn't really replace him, but they did add another quasi tight end in Dalton Kincaid. So I feel like we're going to see a lot more 12 personnel from them this year, which is interesting because if you are getting that, now you're going to be tested, but the Jets are, with your base defensive package. Less Michael Carter II on the field, more either Jamian Sherwood, or if you go with your big nickel and throw Adrian Amos in there as, essentially your extra linebacker instead of Sherwood. So I think the Jets are strongest, again, and that's part of why I think they matched up so well against the Bills last year, is they're strongest with their nickel defense when they have 4-man rush, just our 2 starting linebackers, and our great cornerback trio out there. And then I think, and Quan is really good in his role last year, obviously, but I think that is the strength of the Jets defense when we know you're going to pass and we have the corners to just stop your downfield passing game. So I think that's part of why they matched up against the Bills well. So if the Bills are going to go down in 11 and up in 12, I think that could challenge them a little bit more, especially with Quan not here. And now you're going to have Sherwood tested. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out, how the Bills change their personnel with some of the changes they made to their lineup. But overall, I still don't think Jets fans should take this offense lightly because despite everything last year, Allen's injury, some O-line issues they might have had, run game maybe not the greatest at times outside of Allen, they were still second in scoring last year, 28 points per game. But with that being said, the Jets did show that they match up really well against them. The Bills had their two lowest offensive yardage totals of the season against the Jets. 232 in the second game, which is actually their worst of the season, the one that they won, and 317 in the first game. Two worst yardage totals of the season, including the playoffs. So Jets match up really well against them, and they're at least equally talented, if not more so, this year. And plus, they're, knock on wood, full health going into this game. So, and Quinnen missed half of that second game. They still held them to 232 in the yardage column. So, it's a good matchup for the Jets offense, but it is an elite offense that's prone to explode at any time and will exploit you if you make any mistakes downfield. The Jets just did a really good job of not making those mistakes last year. So Tony Adams is a very key player in this game, making his first opening week start at safety as a young player against a vertical downfield passing team. They're going to test him. And, say what you want about Joyner and Whitehead last year, and I've said plenty. I think they struggled. It was a weakness last year. But at least in those Bills games, they did show up, hold down their roles effectively, and take away those deep passes. The Jets did a really good job of taking away the deep passing game against the Bills, and the safeties deserve credit for that. So Adams needs to be up to the task. The Jets match up well against this Bills team, but always prone to explode.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Jets have Sauce follow Gabe Davis and Reed follow Diggs at times last year? I know we probably should have covered that in the
think
preview, but remember the end of the game,
half of the first game, I think they started to do that a little bit. So because that's an interesting strategy they went with.
Yeah, typically Sauce is their left corner and Reed's their right corner. I'm curious to see if they do match them up a little bit more because Reed is the smaller, more agile of the corners, although Sauce's fluidity is well documented. But maybe he matches up better with Diggs and Sauce has the size and physicality to really make Gabe Davis's day a nightmare. But you touched on the biggest thing. It's really the explosive plays because defensively, I mean, we'll get to this when we talk about the Bills, but it's the same philosophy. Limit the big explosive plays, force them to go underneath. And like you said, last year they won all those matchups. Anytime Allen took a deep shot, it was incomplete or it was intercepted. This year it's key that they keep that up. And the other side of that explosive plays, it's not just the deep ball down the field, but it's Allen running. I feel like last year that was really the thing that killed him, especially on third downs, is Allen was able to take off. And we'll see how much Allen is willing to run. It's always going to be part of his game, but I was reading some stuff from him this offseason talking about he has to get better care of his body this year. I think last year he tried to hurdle over Quincy Williams at one point in the second Bills game. So we'll see how much running he tries to do, but they know what the Bills offense knows what this Jets defense is. They know they're going to have to attack that quick passing game. They're going to try to run the ball. And I think Allen is going to try to take off himself. Quinnen had 3 sacks against this Bills interior and not even 2 full games last year. So obviously he's a superstar on this team, but I feel like he's a big player to watch in terms of matchups for this game.
Yeah, he was very good in that first game and the half game that he played in that second game last year. And I did an article on this recently, the importance of how well he played against the Bills last year and what that means for this game coming up. Because the drives where Quinnen was on the field, the Jets shut the Bills down to the level of a bottom 2 scoring team in the league. 17 points in the entirety of the first game. And then he played the first 4 drives fully in the second game. No points on the board. So the points per drive between 17 points and 12 drives with Quinnen, that's about equal to what the Texans were scoring per drive last year, which was 31st in the league. But then after Quinnen left that Bills game, they scored 20 points the rest of the way on, I believe it was 8 drives. And that's basically equal to the Bills season average, which was second best in the league. So after Quinnen left that game, they were their usual selves in terms of putting up points on a per drive basis. But between the first game and the beginning of that second game, with a healthy Quinnen, the Jets are really shutting them down. So, and we remember watching that game. Once Quinnen went out, there was a noticeable effect. I mean, the first few drives the Jets did hold up, but as it went on, you could see that the line of scrimmage battle was kind of shifting in Buffalo's favor. So it was a huge impact.
No more Nathan Shepard this year, though.
Goes without saying, yeah. And I think that was that's the biggest thing. It's the depth where it really hurt. A little bit too much of those guys you don't want in the game, but now you are hoping that on rundowns, Al Woods can compensate for Quinnen. On pass downs, some more Quentin Jefferson. And Solomon Thomas looked kind of rejuvenated this preseason, so maybe they can get more out of him. But
Brutal
Quinnen very
moonwalk,
important. And even against the center, Mitch Morse, I think he has an opportunity to do damage because he plays right defensive tackle, so he'll go against Connor McGovern, the newly signed left guard for the Bills, who's a pretty solid starter. So that'll be a good matchup. But even against the center, in that first Bills game, Quinnen got a sack on Morse. And prior to that, Morse had gone 16 straight games without allowing a sack. So it didn't even matter who blocked Quinnen last year. He could pick up a sack on any caliber of pass blocker that he faced. So Morse is a nice piece for them in the middle of that O-line, but even last year, Quinnen showed that it does not matter. So for sure, if Quinnen is able to replicate what he was doing last year and when he was healthy against the Bills, they have a good shot to really hold them quiet in this game.
How do you see him rotating the defensive line? Because obviously, these previews will know what this team looks like. This is game one. We have no idea if all 10 of these guys are going to be active. But do you see Will McDonald getting a lot of run? Because when they drafted him, I did think a lot about Josh Allen in terms of getting a guy with his athleticism and his length to be able to hunt Allen down and to keep him into the pocket and force fumbles. Will McDonald seems like the perfect type of player for this type of matchup, but at the end of the day, he's a rookie in a very deep defensive line room. Bryce Huff has been absolutely dominant. In fact, he dominated the Bills last year. So where are those snaps coming from? How do you kind of see them mixing up this defensive line? Do they get away from the hockey subs that they were doing last year? Just kind of what's your prediction for week one?
Well, I think later on we were going to discuss more like who we think the inactives will be for this, because I think there's a chance maybe McDonald is one of them.
Not with the five.
If it's only five, we'll probably be out there.
Well, yeah, insider baseball here.
I should clear that up. We've had some confusion about how many inactives there are. We're 99% positive it's 5. Unless you call someone up from the practice squad, then if you have one guy coming up to 6, 2 up to 7, but 5 is the base. So with that, yeah, McDonald
it's changed a lot.
Where he gets the snaps is the issue.
Yeah, it's changed a lot in the last few years, and you'd be surprised how hard it was to find that out. But I tweeted that out like at least 2 or 3 times, like trying to predict the inactives, and then people were like, "No, it's 7," and then "No, it's 5," and then you text me, "No, it's 6 again," but we're pretty certain it's 5. If it's only 5,
I've had some issues with counting recently.
I know, Jesus, you're the numbers guy.
Podcast. We advertise analytics in the description of our podcast. We can't count.
But if it's 5, I do see McDonald playing. I do think he is dangerous. Say what you want about Bryce Huff. I do think that McDonald is a little less one-dimensional. I do think you can give McDonald some reps on second down. I don't think he, ideally, I guess people imagine McDonald as just a pure pass rusher, slide right into that Bryce Huff role. But I actually feel like out of the two of them, I'd rather McDonald play on second down if it is a run play, just because at least throughout preseason and what we saw in their college career and the fact that McDonald was playing inside his last year of college, I think he's better suited to kind of handle those run plays. Huff, I like the way they use him. I hope to see him more because he's been so damn effective. But I do think there are snaps here for McDonald, especially in this game. I think the underrated part about this matchup is we talk all about Allen. We talk about how they like to air the ball out. But I think it's really going to be stopping the running game, especially on those early downs and creating those third and longs, forcing Allen into those, getting in the position where they can bring Bryce Huff into the game and Will McDonald, and forcing Allen into those mistakes. He turns the ball over and he gets sacked a lot on those third downs when he's trying to make something happen. And it all starts with the Jets kind of controlling the line of scrimmage at the start in those first and 10s, bringing Al Woods out there, bringing their run-heavy person. Do you think it's going to be Johnson or Carl Lawson and their base team defensive line against run?
That's what's going to be interesting. And just to continue the discussion about the defensive line rotation, it's just such a deep unit. There aren't a lot of teams that are going to try to use as many players as the Jets are. They're going to go 10 deep and they're going to try to use all these guys. So it's really unique to have that much talent. And
this strategy was
this
strategy was infuriating 2 years ago, but now it's amazing. Like I remember I think we heckled Ulbrich a little bit walking into the Dolphins game last year. Like, play Quinnen more. because it was frustrating to take him out and kind of limit his snap counts to get Nathan
Yeah,
Shepard and
I remember that.
Solomon Thomas reps. But they brought in Al Woods, they brought in Quentin Jefferson, they've drafted McDonald. Jermaine Johnson seems to have taken a step. We haven't even seen Carl Lawson really this offseason, and Bryce Huff has been dominant. I mean, like they have. This isn't just the strategy that they've used the last 2 years. It made sense. You want to keep these guys fresh, and that's absolutely the goal and the benefit of doing this. But they actually have the talent to do it now. You don't feel like your defensive line takes that much of a back step when you take out Carl Lawson or when you take out John Franklin Myers. You have guys that you can put in there that you feel really good about. So I can't wait till Monday, especially against this O line. I feel good
Right.
about the Jets'
So
chances.
I think in terms of the question you asked, like, will JJ play the most? They do have Lawson listed as the starter, but I'm curious with, he was kind of dealing with some injuries throughout the latter part of training camp. Will they maybe try to limit his role a little bit? And they like what Johnson has done so much. I mean, he's probably been the most praised player of the offseason in terms of just like getting praised when the conversation wasn't about him. I feel like there were at least 2 or 3 times when he just came up and it wasn't even a question about him, whether it was Quinnen or Solid. They just say, like, Johnson's really improved this offseason. The work he's put in has been amazing, things like that. So it seems like they're really high on the progression that he's made, and they'll want to get him more snaps than last year. So maybe they kind of switch roles, and Johnson is more of the, and they don't play the same side of the line, so that's something to keep in mind. JJ was more of the was playing left defensive end last year behind JFM. Lawson was starting on the right side, so that's something to keep in mind unless they want to switch that. It might be hard to get those snaps up, get them to switch roles, but it's going to be very interesting, and we just don't know because with the addition of McDonald, which is a part of this that was not in the equation last year because they didn't have 10 guys who they liked. They had Jacob Martin and Vinny Curry in there at times, but not a first round pick in McDonald with this type of upside who demands snaps. So even compared to last year, it's just a whole different conversation. So we just don't know. And I'm very curious to see what that rotation looks like. I'd like to see more JJ. Would like to see McDonald get a fair share of reps. And I think for Lawson, playing fewer reps could be good for him, to keep him more healthy, keep him fresher, and make him even more effective than he was last year, closer to that efficiency he was with as a member of the Bengals. I think playing less could help allow him to do that and be more effective. So very curious to see how that rotation looks.
And I guess to kind of we touched on it a little bit, but just to cover all bases on the defense, the linebacker is very important in this game, especially with spying Allen, getting after Allen when he runs, and the fact that they're going to attack that quick passing game. They're going to look for the tight ends and the running backs. Mosley, please, for the love of God, no more false start Polamaluing over the line of scrimmage like he did last year.
It's funny now, but it was so frustrating at the
God.
time.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that would be, if you're going to mention any concerns with this Jets defense, is to see how does this defense look without Quan. I don't anticipate a big step back considering the development you've seen with Quincy Williams. They seem to be very high on Jamie and Sherwood. If there's anything that I think Saul and Ulbrich are very confident in, it's their ability to develop linebackers. So I think ultimately it was the right decision, but it should be noted that, yeah, Quan did have a big game in that first Bills game, and I think you could feel his presence all year last year. So that would be the only kind of question mark. But when you balance it out with the improvements in the defensive line, the offseason that Tony Adams has reportedly had, I think you feel good that this defense is even better than it was last year, despite losing Quan. Let's switch gears here and take a look at this Jets offense, which is definitely going to be
Quickly. I want to say one more thing about the defense before we wrap up. And with that defensive line rotation, one package that we discussed maybe before we started recording that could potentially get McDonald some snaps. We talked about maybe for that third down, obvious pass situation package, maybe you replace Lawson with McDonald on that side where Lawson was playing, because Lawson was good in that role last year, but McDonald and Huff with JFM and Quinnen, like, that could be as good of a 4-man rush as you can get in the league. I mean, Quinnen speaks for himself, but JFM as an interior rusher, as we know, is more effective than he is on the outside. He's really like upper echelon with his pressure efficiency in there, but Huff speaks for himself with what he did last year and backed it up in the preseason this year. And then McDonald, I think, in that role, and I agree with you. I think he has more three down ability than Huff does, especially because he was playing some interior in college, which isn't an ideal role for him, but just the fact that he was considered to do that and got experience doing it shows that okay, he's can be trusted with some more physicality, defending the run, things like that. So I agree, but at the same time, as a rookie, just letting him pin his ears back and go after the quarterback in his in passing situations where he knows it's a pass, I think he could be close as effective as Huff was last year, especially with what McDonald showed in the preseason. So I think that's a way to get McDonald some more snaps is maybe sub him in for Lawson on those third down packages and give Lawson some more early down reps to make up for that.
Right.
Or
The
just
thing with
don't give him more
Lawson,
reps because, like I said, like keep him fresher.
I like that package a lot. I definitely think you're going to see it, especially in any situation that's 15 yards or more. I think you're going to see that package out there. The one thing Lawson gives you is the stunts. I think he's probably better at stunting inside
Yeah.
and letting a guy like Quinn or JFM go around him. But McDonald with his length, I mean, Allen had 13 fumbles last year. He only lost 5 of them. And I think that's something with McDonald, that high end trait that you could see him really developing is becoming a guy who can really force a lot of strip sacks with those long arms and the bend he has. So I definitely want to see him get some reps. Do you think any chance they do anything differently schematically against Allen in terms of a QB spy? Anything? Do you anticipate any unique packages? Because look, might be a new offense and new quarterback, whatever, but this is third year with Saleh. This is really when you can kind of add in some of those more unique looks. This is a unit that's been together. Do you anticipate anything funky week one, or do you think we kind of get what we got last year and the Jets are what they are?
Well, in terms of Allen's mobility and stopping that, it's a really interesting discussion in terms of give and take because he did run very well against the Jets last year. First game he had 86 yards. That was his most of the season. 2 touchdowns. That was his most of the season. In the second game he had 10 carries, 47 yards, and a touchdown. So he ran really well against the Jets, but at the same time, despite that, they still only scored 18 and a half points a game across the 2 games, and his passing was, it was those were 2 of his worst passing games of the season.
And you get to hit
First
him.
game, and you get to, that's another great point. Like if he wants to run, it's just more free, hard shots on him where you don't have to worry about a penalty, and you could treat him as a runner. And you never want to aim to injure players, but every team would love to hit the quarterback as much as they can for, just to rattle him. But, that's also a part of it. But nevertheless, despite the rushing success, he didn't pass the ball well. So the way that they were covering, those runs were available, but that was at the cost of taking away the entire Bills passing game because, first game, he had no passing touchdowns, 47 passer rating. That was his worst of the season. And then the second game where the Bills won, he only threw for 5.4 yards an attempt. That was his worst of the season. And then they sacked him a ton too. 5 sacks in the first game, 3 in the second game. So yes, he had the rushing success, but everything else was not working for him in the Bills. So if you make that sort of adjustment to take away the running, then are you maybe giving something else back in exchange for that, So it's that trade-off. Like, are you maybe willing to continue living with him running for however many yards that he wants to? If he's going to continue being as ineffective passing the ball as he was, I think I would live with that because like the floor for the Bills is just never going to be that low because of how good Allen is. And, as long as they have Diggs and the talent that they have, you're never going to completely shut them down. So I'm more than willing to, for me personally, willing to live with, okay, go run for 50, 80 yards, whatever it is, if we're going to hold you to as little in the passing game as the Jets did last year. So that's what I would do, but I am curious to see if they do make any sort of adjustments to try and limit his legs. Whether that's Amos, I think could be a part of that. Maybe play some big nickel to get some more speed out there to match him. I think that's something they could do, especially if, like we talked about earlier, if they play more 12 personnel, then the Jets will be forced to play some more of those bigger packages to match that. That could be your opportunity to get Amos out there instead of like a Sherwood, because then Amos would have more speed to be able to match Josh Allen in the open field. So potentially we could see that. I mean, that's something I would think of. Is there any, like, what do you think of this sort of dilemma? Are would you make changes to try and limit his legs a little bit, or would you be willing to live with that to get the results they got last year?
I definitely think if it's one of those things where you start the game and Allen leads him down on a touchdown drive and he runs it in for a touchdown of
Yeah,
10 or more yards. Like if you start to get into that type of game, I definitely think they'll cause a shift in strategy. I keep calling it Amos. It's Amos, I guess, even though it's an O and not an I, but whatever. I think that's definitely a key player to bring up because that role really was supposed to be Chuck Clark. I think it was supposed to be a bigger part of this defense to have kind of that 3 safety look and one of those safeties being a linebacker. They can still run it with Amos. In fact, he's pretty good down in the box. So I'm curious to see how much of that look do we get in terms of different folds into this Jets defense. I also think there's an argument to be made that this Jets defensive line is so good and it's so deep that there are times where you might be able to rush 3 and have a guy like McDonald or Jermaine Johnson kind of playing back a little bit more, containing and looking to spy Allen because you're confident that you can rush 3 in terms of Quinn and JFM and Jermaine, and then having Will McDonald as kind of an edge who's kind of looking for Allen to run. I think you could see some of that. It's a little different than the pin years back and go get the quarterback that the Jets have done. It doesn't have to be Will McDonald, just I figure a guy with his athleticism and length. But I could see something like that because in that case, you're not sacrificing anything in terms of coverage. You'd be sacrificing your ability to get after the quarterback. But the Jets have so many defensive linemen and they're so good and deep that there are some packages where they might be able to just rush 3 and have one of those more athletic defensive ends hang back.
One more thing on the offense, quick. And what you said earlier about stopping the run game, wanting to create some of those third and longs. I was looking back at because I felt like the Jets did well with that last year, so I wanted to confirm it. And they did do a really good job of that in those 2 Bills games. First game, the Bills running backs, and I think it's important to single out the running backs because Allen is always going to pump up the rushing numbers with his scrambles, but in terms of pure run game, how does that affect the pass game? I think you want to look at the running back. So first game last year, the Bills running backs had 12 carries for 39 yards, so barely over 3 yards a carry. And then in the second game, the Bills running backs had 15 carries for 48 yards. Again, barely over 3 yards a carry. So that was a very good job that they did with the running backs last year. And if they can do that again, I think that's how you can keep Josh Allen in those third longs. And it goes a long way towards limiting the explosiveness because that's when explosive plays are when they're the biggest threat. In those short yardage situations when you're worried about the conversion, they catch you crashing down to protect the first. Yeah, playing the 6, and then that's when you can hit your plays over the top. And the Jets kept them out of those situations last year, so they were able to avoid the big play. So even if Allen did, have a 3rd and 10 conversion or something like that, which he did have a few against the Jets. There was the one, I think, like 3rd and 15 he scrambled for in the second game. Even if he did have conversions like that, they were at least limiting the big plays and making them have to make long drives to score the ball because that's typically not the Bills' game. They're a big play offense. They want to get it all in 2 or 3 plays. But if you make them have to score in 10, 12 plays, then you just create more and more opportunities for turnovers, more opportunities for them to mess up on a single series and have to punt the ball. So that's why I think it's so important to stop the run early.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about, obviously it'll be fun, or hopefully fun, to watch this Jets defense go up against Josh Allen. But the real thing that I'm excited about is Aaron Rodgers' debut. I cannot wait, Michael. I think that's going to be one of the peaks of my Jets fandom, regardless of whatever happens in the rest of the game. But Rodgers running out of that tunnel to a hopefully sellout MetLife crowd. Definitely will be the loudest I've ever heard MetLife. It hopefully is the loudest MetLife has ever been.
Everyone needs to be in their seats, though. Get in your seats. Because I know last year we had some issues with that. Saleh tried to encourage fans. Didn't really work.
They'll light the fireworks off at like 6.
This is all the fans need to be in their seats for the intros, not 5 minutes in the first quarter. Get in the building.
Yeah, if you thought it was hard to get in through those MetLife gates last year or the previous years where it takes forever, it's like, get ready for this game. And also the traffic. I mean, that's
why we go in like an hour early. It's just so peaceful and easy.
At the latest.
Yeah.
But like Rodgers, they'll have the lights off. Everybody's getting the LED wristbands. It's going to be crazy. Him running out to this MetLife crowd is going to be a peak.
So here's a key question on that.
Okay.
Is he going to be the first player introduced
Last.
or the last?
Yeah,
Last, you think?
last. Yeah, he's the A side. What are
But
you talking
I've seen both with superstar players. Like one of my favorite intros of all time is when the Knicks traded for Carmelo Anthony in 2011, and his first game when he was a Knick, and they introduced him first, which I thought was an interesting decision.
No, I think you
So
come out.
I've
I think
seen
you come
both
out with like. I think you go with Becton first.
because I
That's
get
it.
both sides. Because especially with football, and you're introducing 11
Or Breece.
guys, maybe even more.
Maybe
Um,
Breece.
if he's last, then the crowd might kind of be maybe a little
Nah,
winded by that point. So
nah.
maybe you just get him out first. So
No,
so you think
he's
last?
yeah, he's definitely last. You definitely because the
Okay,
anticipation will be building. That's a good prop bet. Who's the first Jets offensive player
I
to come
say
out of the
a
tunnel?
Breeze is a good one to get them going.
Breece is a good one. Becton, biggest guy, his comeback. Probably, I mean, I guess probably Breece. Maybe Garrett, fan favorite. Comment below. Tweet us.
Breeze
What's your
is a really
prediction?
good one.
Probably Breece. All right, that makes sense. All right, let's hop in the rest of it. And you got me just daydreaming about that moment. Of course, I've only seen one Jets
We're
win
almost
in
there. I'm
person.
so pumped.
I'm glad to have got that monkey off my back, that I finally seen the Jets win in person, that I don't feel like I'm a curse anymore, because we were at that Dolphins game last year, but it
Yeah,
is the only win I've seen. I haven't been to that many games, but very excited about this. Jets offense coming out. I feel better about this Jets defense going up against the Bills offense, even though, Bills offense still has Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and drafting Dalton Kincaid. This Bills defense is the one that's aging and Von Miller's out, but I still feel better about the Jets defense because we've seen it. This Jets offense we haven't seen, and as a Jets fan, we haven't seen much good quarterback play, let alone in prime time. But I still think this is a good matchup for this Jets offense, especially with kind of some of the things we laid out at the beginning of this podcast with Von Miller being out and kind of an aging secondary. They lost Tremaine Edmonds in the offseason, which I think is a huge blow to their defense, because that was really what allowed them to thrive and feel like there was 13 guys on the field. Is they take away the deep stuff, they force you to go underneath, and then they had Edmonds and Milano just covering grass, and they don't have that anymore. And they might not be able to get home as fast as they were able to last year without Von Miller. I don't know where you want to start with this. I guess we'll start with this. Garrett Wilson looked pretty damn good in his 2 games against the Bills last year. Now he has Aaron Rodgers. We know that is the connection for the Jets. And over under 10 targets for Garrett in this first game.
over. I'm gonna say over. I feel like that'll be about his season average. Maybe some games he goes a little bit lower if a team
All right,
really
fine.
focuses.
12 and a half.
Take him out 12 and a half.
Make it hard.
I'm gonna say over. I feel like to start
Jeez.
out, they're just because he was so successful against them last year. I feel like the game plan going into this game against the Bills, especially with Corey Davis recently retired, that kind of threw a wrench into things. You're trying to figure out what your sort of hierarchy is with the targets. I say lean on Garrett as heavily as you can until they force you to do something else. If they want to, hard double him, whether that's using a cover 6, shade some help towards him, other side, maybe you have a little more room to work, whatever you're doing, or if it's, just a straight up double team, whatever it is, if they're going to do that at some point, then you start to take advantage of your other matchups. But until they force you to throw the ball to someone else, I don't see, obviously I'm not saying every single play, but I don't see any motivation to not try to feature Garrett as often as possible. Because last year with Zach Wilson and then banged up Mike White in the second game, he was just cooking consistently. And Tre'Davious White came back in that second game, and Garrett got 4 first downs on him in that game. And that's with a few throws that were there that were missed. So he was cooking everyone last year in those 2 Bills games, and it was in different ways too. Like first game, we know there's a lot of RPO stuff over the middle, some quick passes, stuff like that. Second game, he's winning on out routes and slants consistently. So he was doing everything last year against all sorts of defenders and their best corner, who granted was soon coming off an injury. Now he's a little more recovered, but at the same time, he's also up there in age. So I think they should and will feature him very heavily in this game. So if you put it at 12.5, I will go over that.
Do you think the Bills double Garrett, or do you think they try to trust their former Pro Bowl corner, Tre'Davious White, another year off the knee injury? Do you think they go one-on-one there, or do you think they really...
I think they're going to trust him to start and, maybe get to the point where Garrett forces the help. But, Tre'Davious White in his prime was, an amazing player. And I think they are going to give him the chance to show that he is still that, and they're going to play it straight up because for the most part, they're, like you said earlier, a pretty similar defense to the Jets. I would say, like, not a ton of creativity with exotic blitzes and things like that to try to out scheme you. It's more we're going to out execute you.
We might see it
So
without Vaughn, though.
but yeah, that's another key point. I guess we can hop right into that because that's another thing we wrote down here. Like you said earlier, their pressure rate in the 4-man rush way down after Miller left the team last year. So when they play Rodgers last season, when they did have Von Miller, only one blitz the whole game, and that was a successful strategy. The Bills won that game. The Packers offense didn't do a whole lot, but now without Von Miller, and we know that 4-man rush is weaker without him. Could we see more blitzing, more creativity, and could that lend the Bills to do more coverage mixing and matching to double Garrett? That's definitely a fair question. So I think we could see some real differences compared to what they did last year against Rodgers and what they did in their games against the Jets. So I think they are going to start out traditionally, try to do what they do defensively, rely on Tre'Davious White, play their safe coverage, take away those big plays, which is the bread and butter of their defense. But I think if things start to go the wrong way, we could see them adjust quickly.
I guess in my head, I'd had, before we had really looked into, maybe it was just from previous previews, I was thinking, okay, this Bills defense, you got to run the ball against. And that'll open up the stuff downfield. But then you look into it, and they had the 6th fewest rushing yards per attempt, and they were 3rd best in run defense efficiency. It's the return of Breece Hall. It's Dalvin Cook coming off of his injury. We haven't seen either of them in this Jets offense. Let's just focus on the running backs. First, how do you see kind of the splits divvied up? Do you think they really try to ease Breece in, or do you think, Breece is if Breece is ready to go, he's your second best, arguably even second best weapon behind Garrett Wilson, and give him the rock, throw the ball to him, really utilize him to his full strength, or do you think they kind of ease him in with Dalvin Cook and whatnot? And then I guess we can kind of focus on, is that even a wise strategy against this Bills defense? Should they focus on running the ball as much, or should they really try to air it out early?
I feel like, and you let me know what you sort of see them doing in this specific game, but I feel like we're going to see a pretty even Hall Cook split to start it out, just to ease Hall in and make sure that he's fully ready to go before they push him to his limits. I think as the season goes on, we'll see Hall clearly assume the number one duties over Cook. Maybe to the point where it's like he gets 70% of the carries, or maybe like 60, Cook 30, Carter 10, something like that. But in this game, I could see more like Carter getting 10%, and then Hall and Cook maybe 45 each, splitting the majority of it. So I feel like we're going to see a split. In terms of the usage in situations, I feel like maybe Cook is your early down back, and third downs, Hall leans more towards that because I think you trust Hall more in the passing game. I think he's better blocking potential, more all-around receiving potential. Like we saw some downfield stuff with him last year that gave you some hope that he could be a all-around receiving back, not just a screen guy, which, Cook has made some plays in the screen game, but not as much down the field. So I think that's how I could see it playing out. What do you think they're going to do with the running backs?
Yeah, I think they ease him in. I think it's a long season, and teams that are able to run the football in January go far, and I think that's the vision they have in mind with Breece. It's also, he's not even at a full year since that ACL, and sometimes with those types of injuries, they aren't necessarily the same player the first year back. Now, all reports have been good about Breece. I do anticipate that he's going to be good, but he might not be, especially early, the same player. So I do think it's going to be a lot of Dalvin Cook. I mean, yeah, they're going to mix him up. The question is how much are they going to run the football versus how much they're going to try to attack outside and go away from the strength of this Bills defense. Because when I do look at it, and you look at that D-line with Rousseau and Daquan Jones and Oliver, and even without Von Miller, they still have Leonard Floyd. Running right into that might not be as going into it. That's kind of what I was imagining when thinking of this. So run the ball, open it up for Rodgers. But looking at the matchup more in depth, I don't know if that's the smartest approach. I do think that Cook and Hall are going to have a big impact in the passing game, though, because they don't have Tremaine Edmonds. You raised the point to me, though, that, are you playing right into the hands of the Bills if you throw to the running backs early, because that's where Milano is? I would push back on that, though, because, first of all, Milano can't cover everything, and they don't have Edmonds. They lost him. I think it's important for the Jets to challenge that early. First of all, to just get the ball in their hands out in space. But to see what this Bills defense looks like underneath when you do go towards the running backs and tight ends. But yeah, in terms of the split, I think Cook and Hall will be pretty close. It wouldn't surprise me if Cook edges him just a little bit. I'm very curious to see what Dalvin Cook looks like, just because we haven't seen him at all. And then last year he had the labrum injury. He wasn't as good. Obviously, he still had some big explosive plays. Michael, did we agree that it was 4.5 yards per carry at the bye, and you'll get his jersey? Is that what it was? All right, we're setting that in stone. So if he has 4.5 yards per carry at the bye, Michael will be getting a Dalvin Cook jersey. What about the tight ends here? Because I did think maybe we shouldn't care about this at all, but the Jets starting depth chart came out today, and some teams list their starters in 11 personnel. The Jets list theirs in 12 personnel. Regardless, I think you will see a ton of 12 personnel with this Jets offense. They have Conklin, they have Uzama, Ruckert's come on. They also have Nick Bodden, which, 22 personnel or whatever. They want to put a fullback in there. How do you see the Jets' usage, personnel usage, to start out the season with the uncertainty around Hall and Cook, with Corey Davis retiring and kind of the uncertainty around this receiver unit? How do you see the personnel around Rodgers and Garrett Wilson?
Well, it'll be interesting to see because Hackett's history is kind of up and down in terms of how much he's used 12 personnel, but the last 2 years it was pretty heavy. The Packers in 21 were second in 12 personnel usage, and last year the Broncos were number 1 in the league. And that's all relative. They're still going to use 11 personnel the most out of any package because just about every team does. Still well
and
over
Rodgers wants
50%
Randall
of the time.
Cobb out there. Come on now.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think they're going to be like a run-heavy Ravens team or anything like that, but compared to the rest of the league, I think we'll see a lot of 2 tight end packages. The Jets were already, I think, 10th last year at around 22, 23%, something around that. So you work off that. You bring in Hackett, whose team was number 1 last year. And also Rodgers has really good numbers throwing out 12 personnel. It's a package that works really well for him because I think his play action passing is so great because it allows him to, whether it's in the pocket or outside the pocket, I think he's able to, his quick release is very useful for play action because, you come out of that play fake, you got to make a very quick read, get that ball out quickly. You don't get the whole play to read the entire concept because your back is turned. So the quick release helps him. If it's a bootleg or a rollout, his ability to throw off platform, that's something he's good at as well. And then just his ability to read things so quickly is beneficial for play action because, again, like I said, you don't get as much time to read that. So you need to be able to process information quickly, and he can do that. So there are a lot of reasons play action is a strength of his, and with 12 personnel, it's a look that suggests there's a good chance of a run. So it's something you could easily work play action off of, and that's why he's been so successful with that in the past. He has the best total EPA of any quarterback on 12 personnel plays over the past 3 seasons. So it's something that he's good at, something that Hackett likes. I think it's going to be going up this year. But
and specifically in this matchup, it's not a for sure thing. The Bills can still put out their nickel package against 12 personnel, but you come out in 12 and you keep Teron Johnson off the field and you keep the Bills, to force them to have Dorian Williams out there. Terrell Bernard who's replacing Edmonds this year, and then they obviously have Milano. But you come out in that 12 and you have 2 unproven linebackers out there instead of a guy in Teron Johnson who's been pretty good as a slot corner. I think that does play into the Jets' hands. I do think you see a heavy 12 personnel. I think you get Nick Bodden out there. I think you get those heavy packages, but I think you're going to see a lot of RPOs, a lot of quick passes. I think that the pass-run split is going to be heavily in favor of the pass in this game. But I think, when you look at the depth of target, I think it's going to be a lot of quick passes. You saw Rodgers' comfortability or comfort level with Garrett Wilson in the preseason game, getting to the line, seeing a pressure package. The Bills, while they are similar to the Jets, they do show those cover 0 looks. We'll see if they send them a little bit more without Von Miller, but history would dictate, considering they only blitzed Rodgers once last year. Probably not going to get too much of that, but if the Bills are crowding the line of scrimmage, Rodgers has those hand signals, and it's not just with Garrett Wilson, although that's the number 1 guy that he has, but he has comfort level with Lazard and Randall Cobb. I think you're going to, if 12 personnel, you're not going to see as much Cobb, but either way, you're going to see a level of comfort with this offense, and I think a lot of it is going to have to do with option routes with the receivers and RPOs with Rodgers. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning it. What are some of the big matchups that we haven't talked about? There's one specifically in the line that I think is a really important one for the Jets to win. And you had an article, I think like 2 years ago in Mekhi Becton's rookie season talking about how he excelled against kind of the smaller, speedier pass rushers, but he struggled a little bit when guys were able to kind of match his length a little bit. Myles Garrett, of course. Clelin Ferrell, though, as well had success against him as a rookie 2 years ago, different position. Becton's made a lot of strides since then, hopefully. But it is his first game back, and he's going up against a guy in Rousseau who has incredible length, is 6'6", is great in the run game. To me, that's a matchup that really stands out. So I guess you could take that one, and then if there's any other ones that really pop up.
Well, yeah, the Becton versus Rousseau matchup is going to be really interesting because Rousseau plays on the left edge for the Bills pretty much every snap, and he had a really good game in the second game against the Jets last year. Obviously that game is well remembered for the Jets' offensive line being terrible, Mike White getting beat up, even Joe Flacco in his limited time in there. But Rousseau had the most pressures of any Bill in that game. He had 2 sacks, one of those being a strip sack of Flacco. So very good game and a key win for the Bills, key loss for the Jets. So he's a very key factor in this game after the way that he played in that game last year. And it's going to be him and Becton throughout the majority of the game. So like you said, I did that article a couple of years ago and I brought it back up to kind of see what I pulled out of there. And yeah, what I found was that in his rookie year, Becton was actually more effective against players the shorter their arms were and the smaller they were in terms of weight, height, things like that. And it's really the bigger, longer guys that gave him more problems. And there were multiple players involved in that. Myles Garrett was a part of that, but there were also other guys like Clelin Ferrell who weren't nearly as good and still gave him some trouble. So, yeah, and that rookie year listed. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it.
Was there any other ones?
I just wanted to reiterate it. But yeah, I mean, I think guys like that are tough matchups for Becton because they can match his length, and Becton's not always able to just land that hand strike first and establish control of the battle because guys who have long arms, they can match that, and sometimes they can get their hands on Becton first versus, a speed guy. I think Becton has so much length and the foot quickness to match that, if they try an outside rush on him, he's easily able to just get, up the arc with you and push you past the quarterback versus big guys are able to get some good leverage on him because they can match the length. So that was the issue in his rookie year. We'll see 3 years later at this point, which is crazy, how much he's developed that part of his game since then. Can he match up with lengthy edge rushers better? But Rousseau has that length at, with his height and his arms, he is able to win with power, with speed to power, going to the inside. He can do those things that Becton struggled a little bit with in his rookie year. So it's going to be and also in the run game, it'll be interesting because Rousseau does a nice job setting the edge and making plays in that phase. So very crucial matchup.
I am looking forward for the first time. I mean, I guess they got it for a little bit in 2021, but being able to watch Becton next to AVT in the run game, as much as I said, I do think this game is going to be one in the
air. 3/4 of it. So we didn't really see
3/4 on the left side. It was rookie AVT. It wasn't his best game.
Yeah.
But going up against Rousseau and Oliver, that's a huge matchup. Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm off base? Because I'm looking at these rosters, and I think the Bills were so good against the run last year. But I'm overlooking Edmonds' loss, I guess, in the run game. I'm talking about it more and from the passing game perspective. But Edmonds is a huge loss in the run game. I know Breece and Cook are coming off of injury. The one thing that we didn't touch on that I do think you're going to get a fair dose of is both Cook and Hall on the field at the same time. I think you're going to see plenty of that as well. How do you see the run pass splits? Do you think I'm on point there with the fact that I think they're going to air it out and that's really where you're going to win this game? Or do you think that, hey, look, you look at that linebacking depth and you got Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams if they come out in their base package. Yes, they have a good run-stopping defensive line, but hey, this Jets offensive line is healthy. The Jets receiver room is a little weak behind Garrett Wilson. They're going to play a lot of 12 personnel. Part of the benefit of playing 12 personnel is to run the ball and then establish the pass. So how do you see the Jets kind of balancing their pass run splits in Rodgers' debut?
I think it'll be pretty balanced. I don't think there's either side of the ball that's particularly appealing enough to where I want to say, you know, they should be extremely run heavy, extremely pass heavy. I think it's going to be a balanced team throughout the season. And that's not to say it'll be 50-50. I mean, balanced in terms like they'll be average, maybe
Right.
60% passing and 40% running. So I think it'll be around that because there are reasons to like the pass in this game. When you look at the way Garrett Wilson matches up against the Bills, the way he played against them last year. And then also the Bills, they have a good run defense, but with the Jets running back duo and wanting to get the most out of that and set up good situations for Rodgers, you want to get the most out of that too, especially with Von Miller out there, who, for all his pass rushing success, is a very important part of the run defense as well. And as you said, Tremaine Edmonds also isn't there. So there's a good chance the Bills could take a step back with the run defense compared to last year. And I like the point you made earlier about wanting to put out some more 12 personnel packages to force the Bills into that, more base packages, get a third linebacker on the field, challenge that linebacker depth instead of having Johnson out there, who's a really good nickel corner and one of the better nickel corners in the league. It's similar to what we said about the Jets earlier in terms of if the Bills do the same thing to the Jets defense, because I think the Jets are at their best when they have their three corners out there with Michael Carter II. But if you challenge the linebacker depth, maybe you have a little bit more upside. So I like that suggestion you made of doing the same thing to the Bills, and that could be a reason to run the ball. So I see appeal for both, and I think it's going to be a pretty healthy balance. And I think a really important thing to remember with the play selection this year compared to what we're used to as Jets fans is that Rodgers is going to influence that at the line of scrimmage. It's
so much of it
going to less so be a result of the game plan going in and what the script is or the overall mentality. And it's going to adapt on the fly, I think, to a much greater degree than what we've seen. And obviously every quarterback has maybe some degree of play calling or adaptability at the line of scrimmage. But with young quarterbacks like the ones we've seen, especially when the ones that the Jets have had struggled so much to pick up these aspects of the game, I don't think you're getting nearly as much adaptability at the line of scrimmage compared to an Aaron Rodgers who can essentially call the game at the line. So I think that's going to lead to a lot more balance than what we've seen in previous years and a lot more of the game plan just adapting on the fly to match what does and doesn't work in the midst of the game.
Yeah, I know. I've gone back and forth on this in terms of like the preview, thinking it's going to be run heavy, mid-recording being like, actually doing the preview being like, I think this Bills defensive line is so good against the run. They were so good against the run last year. Maybe this is the Rodgers Garrett Wilson show because of the success that Garrett had last year. And then, we start talking about it. I start realizing like, hey, getting Teron Johnson off the field is pretty appealing. The Rodgers had so much success in 12 personnel. They're going to come out in that, and the benefit of that is to run the ball. I flip-flopped on it. I think you're right. I think it is going to be balanced, but the important point is that it's going to be a lot of RPOs and a lot of checks at the line of scrimmage. And so I do think, come out in 12 personnel. I'm ready for the Garrett Wilson show early, but Rodgers isn't afraid to check it into a run play. You have both Breece and Dalvin healthy. I guess that is the benefit of it. It wasn't just Rodgers coming and joining a Jets team with a great defense. Rodgers saw a team with a budding superstar running back and a great running game last year. Maybe great is maybe overselling it, but at least in the Green Bay game. And I think that is kind of the goal of this Jets offense is to be able to run the football, and that's going to open up things downfield. It'll force the Bills to blitz a little bit more and play the run. So I know we waffled there a bit, but I think you're right. I think it's pretty balanced, heavy dose of 12, heavy dose of play action, RPOs. And by the end of the game, I think pass still slightly edges it just because of Garrett Wilson's dominance. But overall, I do think that this Jets offense matches up pretty well. Before we move to the end where we have, predictions, we have one other thing we do. Any other matchups you want to talk about? Is there anything else that kind of jumps out to you, beyond the offensive? I mean, I guess I do have one myself if you don't have any other ones.
Yeah, I have one. There's one I wanted to get to with the Jets defense against the Bills offense. I think the Jets
out of order.
Out of order, going back. But week one, we're getting our groove back here. We got a lot in our minds, so finding our footing. But I think this has been a good start so far. I like what we've done. This has been a really good preview.
Waffle a little bit of the Jets' offensive game plan on my end, but I think you're right. I like the way we've laid it out. We do plan on doing these
I like
every
it though.
week.
Like we don't come out here and say this is going to be run heavy. We're going to run the ball down their
I
throats.
did
We're
come
going to
out with
air
that.
it out.
But
We think about it, with nuance, like looking at both sides of the coin.
yes.
So that might lead to some waffling, but that's how you get the detailed discussions that look at the whole picture. But regardless, matchup I wanted to point out: Jets left defensive ends against the Bills right tackle Spencer Brown. I did an article on this a couple days ago, but this guy is a big part of why the Bills' offensive line is a unit that has more questions to it than I think it gets credit for, at least what I see in the national media compared to the Jets. Um, it, he's probably the worst offensive lineman on either unit in this game, and the Jets already have his number. The last two games he played against the Jets, he missed the Week 9 game last year, but he played in Week 14, and he faced them in Week 18 of 2021. He gave up 7 pressures in each of those games. Those are now tied for his career high at this point. So his 2 worst games of his career in terms of pressures allowed. Franklin Myers destroyed him in that 2021 game. Then last year, both him and Bryce Huff had a bunch of pressures on him. So he's really struggled against the Jets, even beyond his usual standards as a guy who was very close to the bottom of the league in most categories last year, both run and pass. So he's a very exploitable player on that right side. And he was throughout last season. The Bills didn't make a move to improve over him. They were kind of complacent with that situation. So he's still out there. The Jets have his number. They've had a lot of success against him in the past, and they've got another chance to do that. So that'll be the Jets' left side edge rushers. JFM still there. Huff still is probably going to rush off that left side, and Jermaine Johnson most likely will be on that left side as well. So those 3 guys have a chance to do a lot of damage against Spencer Brown and cause some havoc on Josh Allen's right side.
Yeah, no, I think I saw that in our notes that we accidentally lumped that in with the Jets defense or Jets offense rather. But I think that is a huge matchup. It's one that I feel very optimistic about, and part of the reason why every time I think about this game, and I've been thinking about it for months, I just keep coming back to the point. I don't think this Bills offensive line is ready for what's coming.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, yes, this Jets offensive line does have some questions, but they are all healthy. We did talk about the right side of the offensive line with that matchup in Becton and Rousseau and getting AVT back. But I don't think we touched enough on the left side of the offensive line. They get Dwayne Brown back. He's only been practicing for, 2 weeks now? Maybe 3 weeks? 3 weeks now. He's been practicing for 3 weeks. We'll see about the chemistry on this offensive line. But that is really what does stand out to me is Dwayne Brown, Lake, and Tomlinson. They are kind of the X factor of this offensive line. I mean, I know Becton is, there's so many different X factors. I know it's the name of our website, but it's a subjective term. But Dwayne Brown staying healthy, what does he look like at 40? Leonard Floyd is a veteran himself, a great pass rusher. They get 9 sacks last year. How does Dwayne Brown look protecting Aaron Rodgers' backside? And then Lake and Tomlinson, do they get the bounce back year from him going up against Daquan Jones in the trenches, who's a great run stopper for the Bills? And even last year, the second game, Mike White was getting killed in that game, and a lot of that pressure was coming from the interior. I don't anticipate the Bills having the same game plan they had against Mike White in that brutal weather and blitzing a lot more, sending Milano right up the A-gap. But a lot of pressure was coming for that interior, and that falls on Lake and Tomlinson, that falls on McGovern. They didn't have to play AVT last year. I'm pretty confident in his ability. But that left side of the offensive line definitely needs to hold up, especially Dwayne Brown versus Leonard Floyd. That is, Rodgers' debut. I've had nightmares. Please, for the love of God, just keep him upright. Outside of that, though, I feel pretty good. Anything else you want to touch on with those matchups, Jones versus Tomlinson and Floyd against Brown?
Yeah, that's a really interesting matchup there. I mean, the Jets interior is a group that, you have some continuity with a couple of veterans in McGovern and Tomlinson, and then you have AVT coming back at right guard. But, that Bills defensive tackle duo is pretty solid between Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver. That's, I'd say, one of the better duos in the league in terms of having 2 very solid guys next to each other. So the interior will be tested, and especially Tomlinson. I think he's, like, to use that X factor term again, throw it out there. He is really an X factor because, like, to me, what that term means is that there's a huge gap between your best possibility and your worst. And for him, I think he definitely has one of the biggest gaps there because, at his best, he's been a Pro Bowler. And maybe the Pro Bowl overrated him a little bit because he's next to Trent Williams and a good offense, whatever. But he's an above average, probably top 8 to 10 left guard. And then the guy we saw last year was probably, pick your number, but he was a well below average starting guard. So that's a huge gap in terms of what he could give you. So that does make him an X factor. And this will be a good test for him in his first game. And one more blocking matchup that quickly came to mind with what you just said, mentioning Matt Milano, and if the Bills get more blitzes in there, because, like we said, Von Miller's going to be out. Do they account for that? Get a little more creative with the blitz packages. If they blitz more, running backs are going to be tested in pass protection.
And tight ends
talked a lot, and the tight ends. We talked a lot about Dalvin Cook and his blocking questions. Is he going to be up to the challenge? If the Bills are going to send their linebackers? Breece Hall, I think, is good blocking talent. He blocked well last year. He'll have a chance to show that. And then the tight ends too, which you just brought up. I mean, we were watching the Bills highlights a couple of days ago. CJ Uzomah had a very bad strip sack allowed on, I believe it was Flacco. Or no, it was White in the second game. Where Flacco. It was one of those. The Flacco one was the one that Rousseau had. Was it him? No.
I don't know. One of them.
It was on Mike White.
I think you're right.
The one that Flacco lost was by Rousseau. That was against Mike Remmers. But the Uzomah one was on Mike White. He recovered it. But it was one of those controller died sacks where the guy's just so late off the snap, it looks like he's just sitting there for like a second too long. But Uzomah, he was bad last year. I'm just gonna say it. He was so bad as a blocker. Just I don't care about his blue hair and his Broadway plays.
It's supposed to be green.
I want to see Ruckert.
It's supposed to be green.
Yeah, I mean, did you notice that they filmed that whole scene? They went with them to the barbershop or whatever, and they just threw it in the credits. I think that shows
all CJ.
They know he's a backup.
Shoehorned into the credits of the last episode of Hard Knocks.
Throw that in the credits.
I do think your
prediction
from, it must have been from like April, that maybe even sooner, that Ruckert was going to overtake him. I think that's going to age quite nicely. But we
didn't get any Ruckert content though on Hard Knocks, so that's not a great sign.
Well, I don't think that matters as much. I think he's had a good offseason. He missed his rookie offseason, a lot of it with plantar fasciitis. He's back. He's the best blocking tight end on the I mean, Conklin is pretty good blocking tight end, underrated blocking tight end.
Yeah, hit some good blocks in the preseason too. It's going to happen at some point.
It's definitely going to happen. I think to open the season, though, Uzomah, buddy of Rodgers, they go to the U.S. Open together. They go to Broadway Place together. Uzomah is going to be out there. I think they like his receiving potential, but Bodden and Ruckert are kind of looming as better blocking options. So I am curious to see. I'm very curious to see the defensive side of things, how they mix and match the defensive line, but offensively, just these personnel packages. How do they utilize Nick Bodden? How do they utilize the running backs? Are they on the field at the same time a lot? How do they utilize these tight ends? I feel pretty confident that what the receivers are going to look like. I think Garrett's 1, Lazard's 2, Cobb in the slot, Hardman is field stretcher, deluxe Braxton Berrios. But week one will answer. Week one will answer.
I'm going to use that going forward.
Go, feel free. Week one will answer a lot of questions, and I just cannot wait. So there's a few things that we will try to make consistent for all these game previews. We'll start with I'm going to add one actually. I'll shoehorn this in between. Actually, okay, I'll save it for the end. Bad podcasting. I'm sorry. Let's start with what we did for every game preview last year, where the Jets are better. We'll go through each position group quickly because I think we're already over an hour now. Where the Jets are better between the Jets and Bills. We have last year's up, actually, which we won't be able to do for most matchups. But last year we gave the Jets running back, tight end, interior defensive line, corner, safety, and special teams. And the Bills had QB, receiver, tackle, interior offensive line, so entire O-line, edge, and linebacker. That might have been matchup specific, considering on injuries and whatnot. Michael, what changes? I guess start with QB. This is a really hard one.
Wow, that actually makes it interesting for once.
Yeah, the Jets, I think, lost all of these
just automatically not giving the Jets QB last year to now having discussions.
I think because we haven't
We
seen
just
it.
say push. Is that fair?
That's probably
Unless
fair.
we don't want to do pushes.
No, let's leave push.
All right. Yeah, that's fair.
I kind of want to go with Allen just because we haven't seen Rodgers and he has the running, but I don't know. Allen got
I agree that I
stifled by
lean
this.
towards Allen, but it's just too close for me to say that
All right, if we do it by
definitively.
this,
But I think push
which
is fine.
QB had better success against the Jets defense last year?
Wow. I
Rodgers.
mean,
They both didn't play
would you
too
say
well.
that? I mean,
Yeah, Rodgers had those touchdowns to Lazard in the first game or the only game.
he did, but the
He was
Jets
pretty
did
bad in
mostly
that game.
shut him down.
All right, fine,
Let's say
push.
push. We're going
All right,
push.
fine. Running back, feel pretty confident to give the Jets this one.
Yeah.
Damian Harrison. How am I spacing? Damian Harrison, help me out here, please.
Latavius Murray, James Cook.
James Cook, there. That's what I was remembering. Fine running back duo, but I think the Jets have pretty confident in theirs. Receiver, I think you got to go.
I say
Bills.
Jets.
Really?
Oh, you want to give Bills? I mean, I think
Diggs
Wilson
is the
and Diggs
proven.
kind of.
Yeah.
He is more proven.
And
but
Gabe
I feel
Davis
like
is.
the trajectory of Wilson puts him on track to match Diggs this year. And then after that, I think the Jets are deeper.
Michael. I'm thinking ahead here, Michael, because I don't want to give the Jets everything. There is a fair argument that the Jets could be over this, especially when you look at, I think, obviously Cobb is older, but his connection with Rodgers, he's a good veteran slot receiver. He's going to move the chains. Hardman, and then, the rest of the undrafted guys and Irvin Charles, I won't even factor here. I do feel better about that depth than when you look at the Bills, receiver 3, 4, and 5. But Diggs is proven. Gabe Davis is proven and has room to improve.
All right, we'll go Bills.
I'll go with the Bills, yeah. But it's close. Tight end?
We're fair here.
Tight end? Also close.
It's another close one. It's just so hard to say what Kincaid is going to be until he plays. But Dawson Knox has been really solid for them.
All right, go with the
Bills.
Bills.
I like Conklin a lot. We just haven't seen the production because they didn't have the quarterbacks last year.
Go with the Bills. You want to know why?
Give it Bills?
Because I have a feeling the Jets are going to go on a bit of a run here. Tackles?
Okay.
Tackles?
Jets.
Dwayne Brown.
Jets.
Thank you. Interior of the offensive line? McGovern, Morrison, Bates versus Tomlinson, McGovern, and Vera Tucker?
Jets, I would say.
Sorry, I thought you wrote the last one. I have to catch up. All right. We already did. That's the whole offense. Defense? Edge? No Von Miller. This is easy Jets, right?
No Von Miller, Jets. Yeah.
Interior defensive line?
Although, Leonard Floyd, Greg Rousseau.
Come on.
There were 17 sacks between those two guys last year.
Okay, that is fair.
But
John Franklin
it's the
Myers,
depth, I think.
Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson,
after those
Bryce
two guys,
Huff,
they have Epineza,
Will
and then
McDonald.
they have Shaq Lawson, who's, as we know, not very good.
My God.
So I would say the depth of the Jets puts them over the top.
Bills are a good football team, but it's the Jets. Linebacker?
I give it Bills because Milano's probably right up there.
Such a difference
second
maker.
or third best. Yeah.
Fair. All right. Corner, Jets. Not even close.
Yeah.
Although Tre'Davious White could return to former glory. Safety? Hyde and Poirier.
You gotta give it to the Bills.
Yeah.
Yeah. Getting up there, though, so you don't know if a decline is coming. And Hyde's status is up in the air, but they've been really good for a long time.
Now, special teams, I think we normally it's a little easier during the season. We look at the kickers and the punters. Bass and Martin versus Zerline and Morstead. Also, I guess if you factor in punt and kick coverage, which a lot of that comes down to depth. Probably not fair to grade.
It's really hard to say. Yeah.
All right, let's not grade that one. All right,
although the Jets have Thomas Hennessy, that puts them over the top.
That's true. You rocking your Hennessy jersey week 1?
I plan to.
All right, there we go. It's perfect. So that we gave the Jets running back, the entire offensive line, edge, and corner. Oh wait, interior defensive line too, right? Or did we skipped it? My bad.
Oh, we did skip that. That's Jets.
Yeah. So Jets got both sides of the trenches, running back and corner. The Bills got receiver, tight end, linebacker, and safety. And then we pushed on the QBs. Both good teams. I feel like the Jets have the edge where it's important, and that's in the trenches. Now, Michael, before we get to our predictions, we're going to add this because we were talking about it, and I think, you know what? It works. It's the website. Every week, one Jets X Factor for this game. This game specifically, who is your Jets X Factor for week 1?
One Jets X Factor?
Yeah.
On the entire team?
Well, there's obviously a lot. We just went through a ton of matchups, but who is the X Factor? The most objective and using term.
I want to say one guy, but he's kind of the lowest hanging fruit. But it also does make sense, and I have reasons for it beyond just him being a popular choice for this type of thing. I'll just
Give
go
me.
with him. I'll say Mekhi Becton. I
All
think
right.
that matchup against Rousseau, a guy who gave the Jets headaches last year, and because of the type of player he is and how he matches up against Becton, makes him a really key matchup. I mean, like we said, we're confident in the Jets' defense. Not that it's a given against an offense that is this good, but we feel good about that matchup. It's the offense where you're really concerned, especially with the protection, and I think that matchup right there is the biggest swing factor. Rousseau 2 sacks against the Jets last year with a strip sack, so he can do that type of damage against this team. But now you have Mekhi Becton out there instead of Mike Remmers in that game. You could shut him down and totally turn the tide versus what you were getting last year. So that to me is the definition of an X factor.
This is tough. I didn't think about my answer before giving this. Are we going to go with both tackles here?
We
Dwayne
can
Brown.
do it.
Dwayne
Let's
Brown.
do it.
I'm going with
We're
Dwayne
all
Brown.
in on the offensive
I
line.
think that
being
matchup
this
against
important.
Leonard Floyd, protecting Rodgers' blindside, I think that's of the utmost important. If he comes out there and he looks pretty good, not playing with a torn rotator cuff like he did last year, he doesn't have to be dominant, but even if he's just able to not be a turnstile, which I don't expect him to be, he was pretty solid in pass protection. But I think Dwayne Brown is a very big X factor for this team. If he can provide the stability at left tackle, you feel good about this offensive line. If he's getting hurt or if he's struggling, that's when you really got to worry about things. But if he's stable, I think they can survive Becton injuries. They can survive reshuffling of the interior. They just need a stable force at protecting Rodgers' blindside. I feel good about Dwayne Brown. Michael, last thing, prediction. Best case to worst case. Let's start there.
Best case, Jets win. We're going to the Super Bowl.
Fair.
They lose. Number 1 pick is incoming. Trade Rodgers immediately.
All right. I guess that's kind of a lame question. I guess it was best case, worst case. All right. You know what? Fine. Random predictions. Let's just skip that part. Random predictions.
Skip that. We can work on better superlatives and predictions or whatever.
Give me one random prediction.
You
go one for each side.
On the first penalty of the game, the ref's mic goes off and no one knows what the penalty is.
Okay, that doesn't count.
That's random. It does hardly gets more random than that.
Okay, fine. I don't even know how to write that.
I say the lights go out in the second quarter.
Oh, geez, please. Ref's mic. You'll know what it means. All right.
I can come up with something better than that.
All right, give me
you
a
have
second.
A good random one? Oh, you
go. Tell me something about the game. I'll say I'm definitely feeling a Josh Allen fumble. I'm just trying to think about who's going to force it.
I'm going to say Xavier Gibson on the opening kickoff is going to take it at least 40 yards.
Okay. Gibson. I'll put Gibson big kickoff. Big opening kickoff. Okay. I'll go with Bryce Huff, forced fumble on Josh Allen.
Nice.
I kind of want to go with Jermaine Johnson. There. I'm going to change.
Those guys had big plays in that first Bills game last year.
I'm going Jermaine Johnson forced
fumble. Second game, too, Jermaine had a block punt.
All right, Jermaine Johnson
he had fun against the Bills last year.
And I'll say Breece Hall scores a touchdown in his return. Breece Hall,
okay,
TD. Maybe he isn't that bold, but I did have a dream about him breaking his first carry, like 80 yards, opening drive touchdown. So I'll ride with that.
That'd be sick.
All right, score prediction time, Michael.
We got to do a score prediction.
Got to do a score prediction. This is the last thing. This is it. We're done.
Am I legally obligated?
Almost an hour and a half. This is a 90-minute preview.
Not long enough, if you ask me, for a game this big. If we were doing this for the Ravens game and the Panthers game, we should have had a full audio book on this game.
All right, fine. Score prediction, though. Let's hear it.
Can you go first?
None of this matters, but I think the Jets win this one. I've made that abundantly clear.
I almost don't want to predict it because if I say the Jets are going to win, what game am I not going to say they're going to win?
We did this last year. We tried to be
Like if
fair.
I make a schedule prediction, I'll obviously say 11-6 or whatever, and pick the random games for them to lose. But
All
going
right,
into
fine.
the game,
Ignore the score. Win or loss, Jets.
okay. I'm starting to feel like they're going to win. I've been 50-50 for most of the past few months leading into this game, but the more we dig into it, especially with the loss of Miller and some of the other developments recently, which have trended positive for the Jets with their health, I feel like the Jets they match up well. The Bills are a
I
great
think they
team,
do.
but they showed last year that they match up well against them, and I think the things that have happened since then have only furthered how well they match up against this team. So I do feel like a win is coming, but not to the point where I'm gonna predict it or feel super strongly about it.
Okay. We're no score. We're gonna go no score.
All right, I'll throw a score. I'll say Jets 27, Bills 13. Going multi scores.
Wow. I had written down Jets 27, Bills 17, but
I'm going
I
27-20. I'll go 27-20.
no, yeah, 27-17. All right. How about that? Doesn't matter. I don't think we hit one of these last year. You said 27-20? Wow.
Yeah,
All right. That'll do it for us. Follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. Myself, Ben
riveting
W.
finish.
Blessington. Michael
Really
underscore Nania.
rolling
Oh,
through the finish
don't worry.
line.
We're not done. We still got another 2 minutes after this. Michael underscore Nania. Go to jetsxfactor.com. Best place to go for Jets content. Subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube. If you can, please rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. I think that's it. Michael, last thoughts. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about these throwback uniforms quite a bit, but feel free to pepper in anything else you have. This is a big game.
Did you see the video that Woody posted of
Of the helmets, yes, they'll
putting
be
the
wearing them in
sticker on the helmet?
practice. We'll get to see them in
I
practice
I
finally.
did watch it at least 5 times. I'm not afraid to admit it.
Such an upgrade.
They got to make it permanent next year. Just so
I
clearly
feel
better.
pretty confident it's going to be they're going to change it permanently next year. Yeah, I can't wait to see these uniforms on the field. Bills going with the all blues. I don't know how we feel
Do
about
you think
that.
they'll do that, or they'll go?
No, they already
Did they
announced it.
say they're going all blue?
Yeah, yeah, they're
Okay,
going all blue versus the Jets all white. Throwback unis.
that's
Week
interesting.
one,
It kind of
Monday
feels
Night
like a
Football.
color rush game.
I know. Man, I cannot wait for
Let's
this
go.
game.
We're here.
I know.
I'm
I know.
so
We don't sound.
excited.
It's Wednesday, so we're trying to hold the excitement. I still got to travel out there.
I never like scream into the mic. Like this is about as excited.
Oh,
as
I guess
I'll get.
you know what? Here's my other random prediction. I will have no voice next pod. It'll be the return of Batman. That's my prediction.
That's a good prediction.
I was
Batman
sick last
returns.
week. You can kind of hear it. That's what happened with the Dolphins game too. I was getting better, and I just yelled. I feel pretty confident Mike will be hosting the next podcast, which will probably be Tuesday. It'll probably come out Tuesday. Yeah, we'll record it Tuesday. So Tuesday night, Tuesday afternoon, depending on travel and whatnot.
Yeah,
all right, so be on the lookout for that.
Solid 90s movie with the Penguin, and we're gonna have a nice little reboot here next week. But
Very excited. All right,
yeah, I'm looking forward to
it.
it. No, can we quickly wax some poetic about being excited for this game, just because it's so big?
You know what? Go ahead. I'll let you lose.
I mean, it's Wednesday here. It's 9:54.
So
it might not sound like I'm jumping out of my shoes right now, but in 3 days I'm gonna be flying up to New York, and a couple days after that, you and I will be going to the game. Getting ready to see this. I mean, Rodgers' intro, like you said, is going to be amazing, and just the emotions of it being September 11th and all that. And I think they're going to have a F-18 flyover based on what Michael Carter said in that video recently. The LED wristbands, prime time, Bills rematch. Like this is this is
going to sing the national anthem like Sala wants everybody to. Last year I was getting on you. Last year you were not singing the anthem, and I was like, Michael,
I've never been an anthem singer.
I know, but he wanted everybody to sing it, and it was just kind of awkward.
This year.
That's true. He hasn't said it yet.
So
I can't sing.
I don't think the people want me to sing it.
I guess that's true. You know what? I really hope that they
ruin the experience.
Can we fix the JETS chant, by the way, on the jumbotron? Can we please?
They gotta get that right.
Please, I know. Please don't blow the Jets chant. Just put Fireman up there. Let him lead it. The smattering of sorry the other Jets fans that do it, but like they're out of sync. The speeds are different. It just causes like echo in the stadium. Just have Fireman Ed.
It's terrible. It was so cringeworthy, and I think they maybe do a few less of them. Like I feel like maybe it was the Patriots game last year. It was probably like 20 minutes before the game. They were just doing it constantly.
No. I think you ramp it up before the game.
You want to ramp it up. I say like less quantity, more quality.
Definitely kickoffs. Definitely after scores.
Well, I agree with you that it just needs to be synchronized better. Like last year, they were showing 4 different fans on the Jumbotron in different parts of the stadium. It was way out of sync. It was awful. They really need to just let Fireman Ed do his thing.
Also, please, people, third downs, stand up. Start screaming. Scream your head off.
Exactly.
These tickets were expensive.
I make noise on third down. Like you can attest on third down. I make my noise. I mean,
you can attest.
I'm rowdy during the games. Well, yes, you do as well. But I get rowdy during the games once it starts, despite my demeanor on podcast.
That's
when
true.
it's game time, I definitely turn up.
You still have that video of you going crazy during Corey Davis scoring against the Titans by yourself.
I do.
300 levels. All right. People, we made it. Finally here. A meaningful Jets game. Well, I guess we had them last year, but a real meaningful Jets game. A
real game.
A real game. A team that has Super Bowl aspirations for the first time since I was a little kid. It's going to be hopefully a sellout. It's going to be a magical night. If you're going there or not, either way, cannot wait for this game. Everybody just stay safe, drive safe to the game and out. Don't drink too much. Be loud on third down. If you're watching at home, go crazy. Everybody, have a great week. We'll be back on Tuesday. Go Jets.